Her husband humiliated her cruelly in front of everyone. She thought it would be the end of her self-esteem and love. But a millionaire looked at her in an unexpected way and asked for her phone number in front of her cheating husband. What do you think will happen in this story? Comment and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The morning sun partially illuminated the impeccably clean kitchen of the apartment on the Upper East Side of New York City. Victoria was finishing preparing lunchboxes for her husband and children while glancing at the wall clock, mentally calculating how much time she had before. Everyone woke up. At 6 in the morning, this was the only moment of the day that belonged exclusively to her, though even these minutes were filled with tasks for others. At 42, Victoria Mitchell was a woman who had disappeared within her own life. With a degree in interior design, she had abandoned her promising career 15 years ago when her first child, Gabriel, was born. Then came Julia, and the decision to devote herself entirely to the family seemed natural to everyone, except her, who tucked that doubt somewhere so deep that even she could no longer access it. The three-bedroom apartment in the upper middle class building was a silent witness to a routine that had repeated itself for years. Roger, her husband, an executive at a multinational company, woke at 7, quickly drank his coffee without lifting his eyes from his phone, and left for work. The children, now teenagers, got up complaining, gulped down breakfast, and headed off to the private school nearby, where they had studied since they were young. Victoria then began her endless list of tasks: cleaning, shopping, cooking lunch, dealing with contractors, school meetings, children's medical appointments, and occasionally, when Roger permitted, visits to her mother in Long Island. That September morning, while preparing scrambled eggs exactly as Roger liked them, Victoria looked at her distorted reflection in the chrome refrigerator door. It had been a long time since she had really seen herself. Her brown hair, once voluminous and shiny, was now always tied in a practical bun. Her face, which had once been praised for its natural beauty, rarely received more than basic moisturizer. Comfortable and discreet clothes had replaced the colorful and creative pieces she used to wear in college and during the first years of marriage. "Mom, where's my Yankees shirt?" Gabriel's voice echoed down the hallway, interrupting her thoughts. "It's ironed in your closet," she replied automatically, adjusting the heat under the skillet. Minutes later, Roger entered the kitchen, immaculate in his gray suit, checking emails on his phone. He sat at the table without greeting her. "Breakfast is ready," said Victoria, serving him. "Do you have an important meeting today?" Roger responded with a nod, without taking his eyes off the screen. She had grown accustomed to this silence, to this absence that hurt more than any words. When had conversations between them become merely practical information about the house and children? She couldn't remember the last time Roger had asked how she was, what she thought, what she felt. The rest of the morning proceeded as usual. After everyone left, Victoria organized the house, prepared lunch, and went to the supermarket. In the checkout line, she observed a young woman with colorful hair and patterned clothes. There was something about her, a freedom, a presence, that made Victoria feel a pang of nostalgia. It was Roger's birthday that night, 15 years of marriage, and she still made a point of preparing a special dinner, even knowing he would probably arrive late and tired. She bought ingredients for the white sauce pasta he appreciated and a bottle of red wine. It would be a different night, she thought. Perhaps they could talk, really talk. After getting everything ready, Victoria decided to dress up. She opened the wardrobe and pushed aside the neutral-colored pieces that dominated her side of the closet. At the back, she found a navy blue dress she hadn't worn in years. She put it on, surprised to find it still fit her well. She applied light makeup, something she rarely did on ordinary days, and let her hair down. When Roger arrived later than usual, Victoria had already set the table with their good dishes, lit candles, and poured the wine. Gabriel and Julia were at friends' houses, giving the couple privacy. "Happy birthday," she said, trying to ignore that he hadn't noticed her different appearance. Roger muttered a thank you, dropping his briefcase on the sofa and loosening his tie. They sat at the table, and Victoria served the food, trying to start a conversation about his day. That's when it happened. In the middle of a sentence about a new project at the company, Roger finally looked up from his phone and stared at her. It wasn't, however, the look of admiration or affection she had secretly hoped for. "What happened to you?" he asked with a coldness that paralyzed her. "What do you mean?" "That dress, it doesn't flatter you anymore. You've gained weight." He said it casually, as if commenting on the weather, and went back to looking at his phone. "And that loose hair makes you look older. I prefer when you tie it up." The words hit Victoria like a slap. 15 years taking care of the house, the children, him, and this is what he saw. A woman who didn't even deserve a kind look on her wedding anniversary. "You didn't even remember what day it is today, did you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Roger frowned, confused. "Tuesday?" "Our wedding anniversary." An awkward silence hung between them. Roger seemed genuinely surprised, then embarrassed. "Sorry, I have a lot on my mind. We can celebrate this weekend if you want." Victoria didn't respond. She stood up in silence, leaving her plate untouched, and went to the bathroom. She locked the door and faced her reflection in the mirror. Who was this teary-eyed woman? Where was the Victoria who dreamed, who created, who lived? When had she allowed herself to disappear so completely? She opened the drawer looking for tissues, and that's when a small object rolled forward. A cherry-red lipstick in a golden case already worn by time. She picked it up carefully, like someone finding a relic. It was a gift from her best friend from college, Renee, given at graduation. "For you to color the world," said the card that accompanied it. With trembling hands, Victoria removed the cap and twisted the base, revealing the intense pigment that, surprisingly, had not dried out with time. She brought it to her lips and, in an almost ritual gesture, applied it slowly, covering her lips with that color that was once her signature. In the mirror, something had changed. It wasn't just the vibrant color contrasting with the paleness of her face. It was something, in her eyes, a spark, a memory of who she had once been, before being just the mother or Roger's wife, before being invisible. That night, Victoria didn't return to the dinner table. She removed her makeup, stored the lipstick in her purse as a secret talisman, and lay down pretending to sleep when Roger came to the bedroom. But something had begun to change inside her. Something small, fragile, but persistent, like a seed that finds a crack in the concrete and decides, against all odds, to grow. The days following the wedding anniversary brought a new restlessness to Victoria. It was as if that red lipstick had opened a fissure in her carefully organized existence. While performing the same household tasks as always, her mind wandered to long-forgotten places. The decoration projects she designed in college, the trips she had planned to take, the woman she dreamed of becoming. On a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after the incident, Victoria was organizing Roger's office when his cell phone, forgotten on the desk, vibrated with a notification. Normally, she would never look. She respected her husband's privacy and had never had reason to suspect. But something at that moment made her glance at the illuminated screen. "I miss our lunch yesterday. When can we do it again?" The message from someone named Lucy glowed on the screen with an intimacy that made Victoria freeze. Lucy. The name echoed in her memory. She was the new marketing assistant Roger had mentioned a few times, always casually. Very competent, he would say, brought new ideas to the company. Victoria left the phone exactly where it was and continued cleaning the shelf, her movements now mechanical, as her mind processed that information. There was no concrete evidence of anything beyond a lunch, but the familiarity of the tone, the suggestive emoji. Something was wrong. That night, she observed Roger more carefully. He arrived later than usual, mentioning a project closing that had delayed him. He took a long shower before even greeting the children, something unusual in his routine. At dinner, he constantly checked his phone, now with the screen always turned down when he placed it on the table. "How was work today?" asked Victoria, serving the salad. "Normal, the usual chaos." He replied without elaborating, something in his tone closing the subject. Julia, now 13, rolled her eyes with typical teenage impatience. "Dad, do you promise you'll come to my ballet performance on Saturday? It's important." Roger looked uncomfortable. "Honey, a complication came up. I have an extraordinary meeting on Saturday. Board stuff, I can't miss it." Victoria saw the disappointment on her daughter's face. It was the third consecutive performance he had missed. "Can't it be rescheduled? You promised weeks ago." "Don't start, Victoria." His tone was a warning. "Do you think it's easy to maintain this standard of living? Someone needs to do real work in this house." The silence that followed was dense. Gabriel got up and left the table without asking to be excused. Julia stared at her plate, hurt. Victoria felt something she had not allowed to surface for a long time: anger. Who did he think he was to diminish everything she did daily? Real work. As if maintaining a home, raising 2 children, and giving up her own dreams wasn't work. But as always, she swallowed her anger. It was easier that way. Keep the peace, don't create conflict. This had been her mantra for so many years that she no longer knew how to do otherwise. The next morning, while preparing coffee, the phone rang. It was Renee, her college friend, with whom she maintained sporadic contact over the years. "Victoria, I finally found you. You disappeared from social media, girl." Renee's animated voice brought a genuine smile to Victoria's lips. "I don't have time for those things. You know how it is." "I know, that's why I'm calling. I need to tell you some news and make a special invitation." Renee told her that after years working as a designer in Boston, she had returned to New York to open her own interior design studio. And more, she was getting married in a month. "I want you to come, no excuses. It's a small wedding, just for close friends. At the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, that place we always said was magical, remember?" Victoria remembered. It was where they would go to study on spring days, dreaming of the bright future they would have. "Of course I'll come, Renee. I wouldn't miss it for anything. And bring that handsome husband of yours and the kids. I want to meet this family you traded your dreams for." There was a hint of affectionate provocation in Renee's voice. "They'll love to meet the crazy aunt who gave me that red lipstick." "You still have that?" "My God, how long has it been?" "I do, and you know what? I found it the other day. It's still perfect. A sign, friend. Good things withstand time, just like us." After the call, Victoria felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Renee always had that effect on her, reminding her of possibilities, of paths not taken, of who she was before she lost herself. When she mentioned the invitation during dinner, Roger barely lifted his eyes from his plate. "Whose wedding again?" "Renee, my friend from college. You met her at the apartment warming party, remember?" He shrugged. "I don't know if I'll be able to. I have that business trip to Boston around the same time." Victoria felt her stomach. "Thank you." The so-called trip. The one he had mentioned vaguely, without specific dates. Was it a coincidence that it now materialized precisely on the date of the wedding? "Could you confirm the dates?" "The wedding is on the 15th, a Saturday." "I'll see," he replied, clearly disinterested. That night, after the children had retired, and Roger had fallen asleep, Victoria did the unthinkable. She unlocked her husband's phone, she knew the password, it was his date of birth, and opened the messages. The conversation with Lucy was there, extensive, intimate, leaving little room for doubt. There were lunches, work meetings after hours, and messages that made her stomach turn. The last one mentioned a weekend in Boston, exactly on the date of Renee's wedding. Victoria returned the phone to the nightstand and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Her heart was racing, not with sadness as would be expected, but with a silent anger and a strange sense of relief. As if a long-buried suspicion had finally come to light, confirming that she wasn't crazy, that she wasn't imagining the distance, the coldness, the disinterest. The next morning, in the reflection of the bathroom mirror, Victoria saw something different in her eyes, a determination she hadn't recognized in a long time. She took the red lipstick from the drawer and carefully applied it. Then she sent a message to Renee. "I need your help with something for the wedding." At breakfast, when Roger barely noticed her presence as usual, she didn't feel the usual disappointment. Instead, as she watched him distractedly check his phone, an idea began to form in her mind. If he could have a secret life, why couldn't she begin to rebuild her own? Not for revenge, but for survival. After everyone left, Victoria didn't follow her usual routine. Instead, she opened the laptop she rarely used and accessed an online course website. For years, she had ignored advances in interior design, her area of training. It was time to see what she had missed. She found a contemporary design update course that would start the following week. Without thinking twice, she enrolled. Upon finishing, she felt her heart racing as if she had committed a transgression. In a sense, she had transgressed against the version of herself that accepted everything, that didn't dare to change the established order. The version that had convinced herself that her dreams no longer mattered. She spent the rest of the morning researching the career she had abandoned. She discovered that the market had transformed, that there were opportunities for independent professionals, that she could start with small projects. When she realized it was already noon and nothing in the house was tidied, lunch wasn't ready. For the first time in years, this didn't disturb her. The next day, she visited Renee in her studio in Soho. The space, though small, overflowed with personality, exactly like her friend. Vibrant colors, signature design pieces, exuberant plants. It was a place that breathed creativity. "So, what did you think?" asked Renee, serving coffee in artisan cups. "That you did it. You achieved the dream we had together," Victoria replied, a mix of admiration and melancholy in her voice. "It's never too late for you too, you know." Renee looked at her seriously. "By the way, what did you want to ask me about the wedding?" Victoria hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I want you to help me look stunning, like I've never been before." Renee's eyes sparkled. "Friend, you don't know how long I've waited to hear that." The weeks preceding Renee's wedding were of an intensity Victoria hadn't experienced in years. Divided between her family routine, which she maintained with the discipline of always, and a new secret life that was beginning to flourish, she felt as if she were living in two parallel worlds. Every Tuesday and Thursday, while the children were at school and Roger at work, Victoria attended the design update course. At first, she felt out of place. She was the oldest in the class, the only one who had spent so many years away from the market. The software they now used was different. Trends had changed. Even the technical vocabulary seemed foreign to her ears. But there was something that remained intact. Her eye. Her ability to see spaces and transform them mentally. "You have a unique vision," commented the professor after analyzing her first project. "There's a maturity in your approach that younger people haven't yet developed." Those words stayed with her, feeding a long-dormant confidence. At home, when everyone was asleep, Victoria spent hours drawing on the tablet she had bought secretly, carefully storing it in a shoebox at the bottom of the closet. It was her secret, her treasure, just like the red lipstick she now wore daily, but always removed before anyone in the family could see. The week of the wedding finally arrived. Roger confirmed his trip to Boston, barely disguising his satisfaction. "It's going to be a tough weekend, but important for my career," he said during dinner, 2 days before departure. "Then we can take a family vacation to make up for it." Victoria nodded, pretending to believe. She knew exactly who he would be with and what they would do. The messages on his phone, which she now regularly checked when she had the opportunity, left no doubt. But surprisingly, the pain she expected to feel had been replaced by a strange indifference, as if that marriage had already ended a long time ago. They were just keeping up appearances of a union that no longer existed. "Gabriel and Julia will stay at my mother's," she informed him calmly. "I'm going to Renee's wedding, remember?" "Ah yes, that artist friend of yours." The condescending tone didn't go unnoticed. "Have fun talking about curtains and pillows." Victoria smiled, a new smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We certainly will." On Saturday morning, after dropping the children at their grandmother's house in Long Island, Victoria headed to the most exclusive salon in the Upper West Side, where Renee had booked an appointment for her. It was a gift from her friend, "Your complete upgrade," as she had joked. Upon entering the sophisticated space, she felt momentarily intimidated. Elegant women circulated through the environment, all seeming perfectly at ease in that universe, of beauty and care that she had abandoned so long ago. But Julian, the hairstylist recommended by Renee, welcomed her with a warmth that dispelled her nervousness. "So you're the famous Victoria," Renee told me a lot about you. He led her to the chair, critically analyzing her hair. I see a lot of potential here. What do you think of a more dramatic change? Victoria hesitated for only a second before responding. Do what you think is best. I trust you. 3 hours later, Victoria barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Her hair, once long and shapeless, now displayed a modern cut at shoulder length with layers that perfectly framed her face. Highlights in caramel tones illuminated the natural brown, giving it life and movement. The makeup applied by a specialist in tones for mature skin highlighted her green eyes and cheekbones, creating a luminosity she hadn't seen in herself in a long time. My God, she whispered, lightly touching the tips of her hair as if to confirm it was real. Julian smiled, satisfied with her reaction. Now you're ready for the dress Renee chose. The dress. Victoria had almost forgotten that detail. Renee had insisted on gifting her with the outfit for the occasion as well, saying only that it would be something the old Victoria would wear without thinking twice. In the fitting room of the boutique, a small concept store hidden on a quiet street in Soho, Victoria unwrapped the package carefully. The fabric slid between her fingers, silk in a deep shade of navy blue, almost nocturnal. The model was elegant and bold at the same time, a discreet neckline in the front, but a more pronounced one in the back, 3/4 sleeves, and a length that ended just below the knees. It wasn't extravagant, but it had personality. It had presence. As she dressed, she felt as if she were reconnecting with a version of herself she had left behind. That Victoria who took risks, who didn't hide, who occupied space. At the wedding reception held in an elegant space in the gardens of a boutique hotel in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, Victoria arrived alone. The environment was decorated with tropical flowers and soft lights, creating a romantic yet contemporary atmosphere, exactly like Renee. Victoria? The male voice behind her made her turn. It was Carlos, a college colleague she hadn't seen in years. His eyes widened in recognition and admiration. My God, you look stunning. For a moment, Victoria didn't know how to react. It had been so long since she had received a genuine compliment that she had almost forgotten how to respond. Thank you, Carlos. You look great too. Where's Roger? Renee told me you had married that guy from business school. He had an unavoidable work commitment. The lie came easily, almost rehearsed. During the ceremony, watching Renee radiant in her unconventional dress, a short model in a shade of antique pink, completely different from the traditional white, Victoria felt a pang of envy. Not for the marriage itself, but for the freedom. Renee had built a life on her own terms. She had never given up who she was, not even for love. At the party that followed, Victoria surprised herself by dancing, laughing, talking about art and design with old colleagues who, like Renee, had pursued careers in the field. Some commented on her disappearance, asking why she had abandoned such promising talent. She deflected, not knowing how to explain that she had given up on herself for a marriage that she now realized had been a prison. It was during a break from the dance floor, while savoring a glass of sparkling wine on the veranda overlooking the illuminated garden, that she noticed a man observing her with interest. Tall, with grey hair at the temples and a perceptive look, he seemed out of place. He wasn't part of the circle of college friends. Excuse the indiscretion, but I couldn't help noticing your dress, he said, approaching with a natural elegance. The cut is magnificent, vintage 50s reinterpreted, isn't it? Victoria smiled, surprised by the precise observation. Exactly. You understand fashion? Design in general. I'm an architect, so I end up paying attention to details, shapes, textures. He extended his hand. Anthony Morgan. Victoria Mitchell. You're a designer, I suppose. Everyone at this party seems to be from the field. I'm coming back gradually. I took a break of 15 years. Anthony raised his eyebrows, genuinely intrigued. A considerable pause. What made you come back? The question, so simple, caught her off guard. What, in fact, had made her come back? The red lipstick? Her husband's betrayal? Or something deeper? A calling she had been ignoring for too long? I realized I had lost myself, she replied with an honesty that surprised even herself, and I'm trying to find myself again. Anthony studied her for a moment, as if evaluating not just her words, but something more fundamental in her. You know what I see? Someone with a unique eye, the kind of eye that transforms spaces. The conversation flowed with unexpected ease. Anthony wasn't just an architect, but the owner of one of the most respected firms in New York, specializing in sustainable projects and historical restorations. He spoke passionately about his work, about the importance of preserving the identity of spaces while adapting them for new uses. "We're always looking for collaborators with fresh vision," he commented as the night was advancing, "especially for the interior design line we're developing." Victoria felt her heart race. It was an opening, a possibility she hadn't expected to find that night. "I don't have an updated portfolio," she admitted, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "As I said, I'm just beginning to return." Anthony smiled, taking a card from the inside pocket of his jacket. "When you're ready, look me up. Maybe we can start with a test project." When Renee approached, minutes later, she found Victoria still, looking at the card with an expression of astonishment. "I see you met Anthony," commented her friend with a complicit smile. "One of the best in the business, and single, by the way." "Renee, it's nothing like that." "Not yet," her friend winked. "But I saw how you were talking. There was a connection there." "A professional connection only," Victoria insisted, although something inside her recognized that there was more. Not a romantic interest, but a kind of mutual recognition, as if Anthony had seen something in her that even she couldn't fully see. Later, returning home in the early hours, Victoria found the apartment silent and empty. She went to the bathroom and, before removing her makeup, observed her reflection at length. The woman who stared back at her was not the same who had left there in the morning. It wasn't just the hair, the makeup, or the dress. It was the sparkle in her eyes, the more upright posture, the sense of possibility that radiated from inside out. She carefully placed Anthony's card in the same drawer where she kept the red lipstick, her small sanctuary of secrets and promises. As she prepared for bed, a certainty grew within her. That night had not just been a pause in the monotony of her life. It had been the first step towards something new, something that was exclusively hers. The week following Renee's wedding brought an apparently normal routine to the Upper East Side apartment. Victoria went back to tying her hair, though now in a more elegant bun that enhanced the new cut, and resumed her household chores with the same efficiency as always. When Roger returned from Boston on Sunday night, she received him without questions about the trip, serving dinner as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. On Tuesday and Thursday mornings, after dropping the children at school, Victoria no longer went straight home or to the supermarket. She headed to the design course, absorbing each new piece of information with a veracity that surprised her much younger colleagues. In her free afternoons, she visited decoration stores, studied specialized magazines, and secretly worked on her first project, the renovation of Renee's office, which her friend had offered as an opportunity to rebuild her portfolio. Anthony's card remained stored in the drawer, next to the red lipstick she now wore frequently, though she removed it before returning home. It wasn't just a matter of hiding her transformation from Roger. It was something deeper. That new Victoria emerging slowly was her private treasure, something she needed to protect and cultivate away from the gazes that had diminished her for so long. On Thursday, 2 weeks after the wedding, Victoria was concentrating on her tablet, finalizing the project for Renee's office, when a notification interrupted her work. It was an email from Anthony Morgan's office, confirming the meeting she had requested for the following week. Her heart raced. She had sent the message in an impulse of courage, without really believing it would be answered so quickly. "Mom? What's that?" Julia's voice startled her. Her daughter had entered the room silently and was now looking curiously at the tablet screen, where the three-dimensional project of the office was slowly rotating. "It's a job I'm doing for Aunt Renee," Victoria replied, resisting the urge to hide the screen. Julia sat on the edge of the bed, observing with interest. "You did this? It's incredible. It looks professional." I am professional, honey. The words came out before she could contain them, with a firmness that surprised them both. I mean, I was. I'm coming back gradually. I've never seen you doing these things, commented Julia, leaning in to better see the details of the project. Why did you stop? The question, so simple and direct as only could come from a teenager, hit Victoria like lightning. Why had she stopped? The conventional answer, to raise the children, to take care of the family, suddenly seemed insufficient, almost an excuse. Sometimes we lose ourselves along the way, honey, she finally replied. But the important thing is to find the way back. Julia studied her with a disconcerting intensity, as if seeing something new in her mother. I think it's cool that you're doing this. You seem different, happier. The comment warmed Victoria's heart. Among all the people in her life, it was her teenage daughter, normally absorbed in her own world, who first noticed the change. Can I help you? I'm learning graphic design at school. Maybe I can do something on the computer. The offer surprised Victoria. It had been months since she and Julia had shared any activity besides obligatory meals. The idea of working together with her daughter on something creative lit an unexpected joy. I'd love that, my love. How about after dinner? That night marked the beginning of a new dynamic in the relationship between mother and daughter. Sitting side by side at the living room table, they worked together on the project, Victoria explaining interior design concepts, Julia showing digital editing, tricks she had learned at school. For the first time in a long time, they really talked, not just about household chores or school obligations, but about dreams, ideas, possibilities. Were you really good at this before you stopped? Asked Julia, as they adjusted the virtual lighting in the office. I was promising, Victoria replied, recalling the praise from professors, the awards in university competitions. I had a different approach, more intuitive than technical. And Dad, did he support your work? The innocent question touched an old wound. Victoria hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of Roger to her daughter, but also tired of perpetuating the fiction of the perfect marriage. Your father has always been very focused on his own career, she responded diplomatically. When you were born, it seemed natural that I would stay at home. Natural for whom? Julia asked with the sharp insight of adolescence. For you or for him? Victoria had no immediate response. The truth was too complex to put into words. How to explain? That she had let herself be slowly erased year after year without even realizing she was disappearing. The next morning, entering the kitchen to prepare coffee, Victoria found Roger already awake, something unusual in his routine. He observed her with a strange expression as she turned on the coffee maker. What was that last night? He asked, without preamble. What was what? You and Julia locked in the living room until late. What were you doing? There was something accusatory in his tone that deeply bothered her, as if sharing time with her daughter was a transgression. We were working on a design project for Renee's office. Roger frowned, confused. Design? Since when did you go back to doing that? I'm taking an update course on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And when did you plan to tell me? His tone oscillated between surprise and irritation. I thought you were at the gym those days. You never asked, Victoria replied simply, serving coffee in 2 cups, just as I never ask about your lunches with Lucy. The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Roger visibly paled, then regained his composure, assuming a defensive expression. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. Victoria kept her voice calm, surprising herself with her tranquility. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. I have a meeting on Monday with Anthony Morgan from Morgan & Associates architecture firm. I'm going to present a job proposal. Roger stared at her as if she had announced she was joining a circus. Are you serious? After 15 years out of the market, nobody's going to hire you, Victoria. We'll see, she replied, feeling a strength growing inside her. Which reminds me, I need to update my resume. Do you mind having frozen food for dinner today? I won't have time to cook. Leaving Roger dumbfounded in the kitchen, Victoria went to the bedroom to get ready. She chose a blue blouse she hadn't worn in years, left her hair loose, and before leaving, applied the red lipstick she now always carried in her purse. For the first time, she didn't care about removing her makeup before returning home. It was time for the outside world to meet the new Victoria. Monday arrived with an almost physical anxiety. Victoria had spent the entire weekend refining her portfolio with the enthusiastic help of Julia and under the increasingly suspicious gaze of Roger, who oscillated between completely ignoring her new project and making derogatory comments about her chances. They probably only scheduled this meeting out of politeness, he said on Sunday night, while Victoria was reviewing her presentation. Don't create expectations. Victoria didn't respond. There was something liberating about no longer caring for his approval. Morgan & Associates occupied 2 floors of a commercial building in Chelsea with a view of New York Harbor. The reception, a spacious area with glass walls and exposed concrete, displayed models of award-winning projects and photographs of restored buildings. Victoria felt simultaneously intimidated and stimulated by that environment that breathed excellence. Anthony received her personally, leading her to a meeting room where 3 other professionals were waiting. He introduced her as a talented designer with a unique eye for transitional spaces, a description that made her blush but also straighten up with a long-forgotten pride. During the presentation, Victoria surprised herself with her own eloquence. She spoke about the project for Renee's office, explaining her aesthetic and functional choices, detailing how she had integrated sustainable elements with a design that respected her friend's vibrant personality. Then she showed some conceptual projects she had developed in the last few weeks, small residential spaces transformed with targeted and economical interventions. "What impresses me most," commented Anthony when she finished, "is your ability to see beyond the obvious. You don't just decorate environments, you see potential where others would see limitations." The other professionals agreed, asking technical questions that Victoria answered with growing confidence. And then, Anthony made the proposal that would change everything. "We have a client, the Japan-America Cultural Institute, that is renovating its headquarters here in New York. It's a historic mansion in Greenwich Village that needs to be modernized while maintaining its original characteristics. We need someone to lead the interior design project, working closely with our architecture team. Would you be interested in taking on this challenge as an external consultant?" Victoria felt the world spin for a moment. It was a much bigger opportunity than she expected, a significant project for an important client at a renowned firm. Yes, of course I would," she replied, trying not to show her astonishment. "When would we start?" "Immediately, if possible. The deadline is tight. 3 months for the complete project, 6 for execution." Leaving the office 2 hours later, with a preliminary contract in her purse and her head bubbling with ideas, Victoria stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. The city air, the sounds of traffic, the hurried people, the heat of the March sun, everything seemed more intense, more real. As if she were awakening from a long sleep, she picked up the phone and called Renee. "I got it," she said simply when her friend answered. The shout of joy on the other end of the line made her smile. "I knew it. I told you. You never stopped." "Being talented, Vic." "I'm so afraid," admitted Victoria, verbalizing the insecurity that mixed with euphoria. "What if I can't do it? If I'm not up to it?" "What if you shine brighter than you imagine?" Renee countered. "Remember what our project professor always said? Fear is just excitement without breathing. Breathe, friend, you were born for this." That night, returning home, Victoria found a note from Julia informing that she had gone to the movies with friends and that Gabriel was at a classmate's house studying for a test. Roger, as always on Mondays, would arrive late due to a weekly meeting. Alone in the silent apartment, Victoria felt a strange sensation of detachment, as if that space, which had been her world for so many years, was now just a temporary setting, a place of passage, no longer the center of her existence. She went to the closet and began to separate clothes she hadn't worn in years, formal pieces, blazers, tailored pants she had kept out of sentimentalism, or a vague hope of one day returning to work. Some no longer fit, Others were out of fashion, but some key pieces could be updated with the right accessories. While organizing what she would wear in her new job, Victoria realized she was literally making room for her new life within the old one. And the question that wouldn't be silenced echoed in her mind. Would there be enough space for both to exist simultaneously? Or would the time come when she would have to definitively choose between the woman she had been out of obligation and the one she was rediscovering by choice? The historic mansion in Greenwich Village was an imposing early 20th century construction, with wide verandas, high ceilings, and a privileged view of the city. Originally the residence of a Japanese diplomat, the property had been acquired by the Japan-America Cultural Institute in the 1980s, and since then served as headquarters for exhibitions, language classes, and cultural events. Now it needed a renovation that would preserve its historical soul while adapting it to contemporary needs. For Victoria, the project represented much more than a job. It was a metaphor for her own life. Like that mansion, she too was seeking a way to honor her roots while reinventing herself for a new chapter. And like the century-old construction, she carried marks of time that could not, nor should, be erased, only reinterpreted. The first weeks on the project were an emotional roller coaster. During the day, she immersed herself in the work with a passion that surprised even her new colleagues. She researched the history of the mansion, studied traditional Japanese architecture, discussed possibilities with Anthony's team. There were days when she completely forgot to have lunch, absorbed in the details of a panel that would integrate Brazilian and Japanese elements. At night, she returned home and resumed her role as mother and wife, as if interpreting a character in a play whose script she knew by heart. She prepared dinner, helped the children with school assignments, kept the house running with the same efficiency as always. The difference was that now, while performing these familiar tasks, her mind often flew to the mansion in Greenwich Village, to the colors she planned to use in the exhibition hall, to the lighting that would enhance the Zen garden in the inner courtyard. The new routine required adjustments. For the first time in 15 years, Victoria hired a housekeeper to help 3 times a week. She started shopping online to save time. She established a rotation of tasks with the children. To her surprise, both Gabriel and Julia accepted the new responsibilities well, especially when she explained the reason. "I'm proud of you, Mom," said Julia one night while helping to put away the groceries. "It's cool to see you doing something you love." Roger's reaction, on the other hand, oscillated between condescending skepticism and poorly disguised irritation. At first, he treated Victoria's new job as a temporary hobby, something that would soon be abandoned when she came to her senses. As the weeks passed and she remained committed, his discomfort became more evident. "Again, we have frozen food for dinner," he complained on a Thursday, a month after the start of the project. "This is becoming routine." "The lasagna is homemade, it was just in the freezer," Victoria calmly replied, helping herself to salad. "And tomorrow I'll make that seafood stew you like." "It's not just the food, Victoria, it's everything. The house isn't like it used to be, things are out of place." "What specific thing is out of place, Roger?" she asked, still maintaining her calm but with a touch of firmness in her voice that was new. He hesitated, clearly unable to point to anything concrete. "That's not the point. The point is that you're neglecting your responsibilities because of this or temporary job." "Temporary?" Victoria put down her fork, looking at him directly. "The contract is for 9 months, with the possibility of extension, and I'm already in negotiation for a second project with another client." Roger stared at her with genuine surprise, as if only now realizing that the situation was more serious than he had imagined. "But what about the family? What about us?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implicit meanings. Victoria felt something break inside her, not in a traumatic way, but like a ripe fruit that finally detaches from the branch. "The family continues to be my priority, Roger, but it can no longer be my only identity. I no longer want to be just Gabriel's mother or Roger's wife. I want to be Victoria again." He stared at her as if seeing a stranger. "And who is this Victoria?" "I'm discovering," she replied simply, "day by day." The conversation was interrupted by Gabriel's arrival, excited with the news that he had been selected for a state chess tournament. The subject was suspended like so many other important issues in that marriage, not resolved, just temporarily postponed. That night, while arranging her new improvised office in the former guest room, Victoria found a cardboard box forgotten at the bottom of the closet. "College," said the yellowed label written in her handwriting from 2 decades ago. Sitting on the floor, she opened the box with almost reverential care. There were her college works, photographs of models, hand-drawn sketches, magazine clippings. That inspired her. At the bottom, she found a red, leather-bound notebook, her diary from her university years. Victoria hesitated for a moment before opening it. It was like visiting a previous version of herself, someone she knew intimately, and at the same time a stranger. The pages were filled with a more rounded and youthful handwriting than her current one. Plans, dreams, ideas, all recorded with the characteristic enthusiasm of someone who has the entire future ahead. On the last page, she found something that made her freeze, a list titled Before 30, written in her handwriting at age 22. It was a list of personal and professional goals that young Victoria hoped to achieve. Open my own design studio. Design a public space that makes a difference in people's lives. Live at least 6 months in another country. Learn a 3rd language fluently. Have an exhibition with my experimental photographs. Publish articles in design magazines. Create a line of sustainable furniture. Go hiking in the 5 most beautiful national parks in America. Learn to surf, have a family without giving up who I am. The last item on the list hit her like a punch to the stomach. Have a family without giving up who I am. At 22, she already knew the risk. She already intuited the danger of losing herself in the role of wife and mother, and yet she had let exactly that happen. Victoria closed the diary and hugged it against her chest, feeling a mixture of sadness for the lost time and a renewed determination not to waste even one more day. It wasn't about lamenting the past, but about rescuing what she still could of the future. The next day, she took the diary to work. During the lunch break, she sat in the garden of the mansion and reread selected passages, seeking to reconnect with the essence of that young woman who had so many dreams and so much confidence in her ability to achieve them. "Research material?" asked Anthony, approaching with a curious smile. Victoria closed the diary, a little embarrassed. "Something like that. I'm researching my own past." Anthony sat beside her on the wooden bench. Over the last few months, they had developed a professional partnership based on mutual respect and growing admiration. He valued her intuition for spaces and her sensitivity to understand the needs of users. She admired his technical vision and his commitment to historical preservation. "Sometimes we need to look back to find the way forward," he commented, contemplating the garden. "This mansion is teaching me that. Each mark, each detail tells a story that deserves to be preserved, even as we create something new." Victoria nodded, feeling a deep connection to those words. "I've been thinking a lot about that lately, about how to reconcile who I was, who I am, and who I want to be." "And who do you want to be, Victoria?" The question, asked without pretension or judgment, made her reflect. "I want to be someone who isn't afraid to occupy space, someone who creates beauty and meaning, someone who inspires others, especially my daughter, to never give up on their dreams." Anthony smiled, a warm smile that illuminated his experienced eyes. "Well, from what I see, you're already that person. Maybe you just need to believe it." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of other team members, but Anthony's words stayed with Victoria for the rest of the day. There was a simple and powerful truth there. The change was already happening from the inside out. It wasn't just the work or the red lipstick or the different clothes. It was a presence, a way of inhabiting the world with full awareness of her value. In the following weeks, Victoria began to implement small changes inspired by her list from age 22. She enrolled in an online Japanese course, taking advantage of the immersion in the Institute's project. She unearthed her old camera and began to document the transformation of the mansion, with a particular eye for textures and plays of light. On weekends, she occasionally invited Gabriel and Julia for walks in parks and nature reserves near New York, a prelude to the more ambitious hikes she planned to do in the future. At home, the tension with Roger grew silently. He began to work even later, arriving when everyone was already asleep. When he was present, he remained distant, as if inhabiting another planet. They no longer talked about her work. It was a forbidden subject, an open wound that neither knew how to treat. One night, while checking emails before bed, Victoria received a message from a design magazine requesting an interview about the Institute's project. "We're doing a series on reinvented historical buildings, and your work with Japan-America cultural integration caught our attention," the text said. Excited, she turned to share the news with Roger, who was reading beside her in bed. The words died on her lips when she saw the screen of his phone. A message from Lucy glowed on the screen, along with a photo that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The most surprising thing for Victoria was realizing that she didn't feel the pain she expected. There was a sadness, yes, for the end of something that had once been important, but there was no longer the desperation of losing something essential. That marriage had already ended a long time ago. They were just keeping up appearances of a union that no longer existed. "Going to answer?" asked Roger, noticing her look at the screen. "The message isn't for me," Victoria replied simply, "just as that photo wasn't for me to see." Roger quickly locked the phone, his face alternating between surprise and guilt. "Victoria, I can explain." "You don't need to, really." She interrupted him with a calmness that surprised them both. "I think we need to talk, but not now. I'm not angry, Roger. I'm just tired of pretending." Turning to the other side, Victoria tried to process what had just happened. She had just confirmed her husband's infidelity and instead of collapsing felt strangely light, as if the last tie that bound her to her old life had been cut. That night, she dreamed of the mansion in Greenwich Village. In the dream, she walked through endless rooms, each more beautiful than the last. In one of them, she found a door that led to a suspended garden with a view of the sea. She was alone but not lonely, free but connected to something greater. When she woke up, she knew exactly what to do with the abandoned terrace of the Institute, transform it into a contemplative garden that fused elements of the New York landscape with Japanese Zen aesthetics, a space between worlds, as she herself felt now, with roots firmly planted but ready to take flight. The interview for the design magazine took place on a sunny June afternoon in the very mansion of the Japan-America Cultural Institute. Victoria guided the journalist and photographer through the already renovated spaces, explaining concepts, inspirations, and challenges. She spoke with an eloquence that surprised herself, detailing how each element of the project had been designed to create dialogues between cultures, between past and present. "What impresses me most," commented the journalist as they observed the terrace newly transformed into a contemplative garden, "is how you managed to materialize such an abstract concept as the cultural in-between place. It's not just beautiful, it's meaningful." The words touched Victoria deeply. That was exactly what she sought in her work, to create spaces that were not just aesthetically pleasing, but that told stories, that provoked sensations, that made sense to those who inhabited them. "This terrace," she explained, "is my favorite space in the project. From here you can see the Empire State Building, the ultimate symbol of New York, but we also have these Japanese elements, the rock garden, the bamboo fountain. It's like being between two worlds, belonging to both simultaneously." What Victoria didn't say, but felt intensely at that moment, was how much that space reflected her own personal journey, the search for a balance between her multiple roles, between the known and the new, between permanence and transformation. The article was published 2 weeks later, with a title that made her smile: "Renaissance in Greenwich Village, How Victoria Mitchell is Redefining Cultural Spaces in New York." The text was complimentary, highlighting her unique sensitivity and her ability to respect history, while creating something contemporary. The photographs, artistically composed, showed not only the environments but also Victoria in her element, focused, confident, visibly passionate about what she was doing. On the day the magazine hit the newsstands, Victoria brought a copy home, a mixture of pride and apprehension pulsing in her chest. It was the first time her work had received public recognition since she had resumed her career, and she wanted to share that moment with her family, especially with her children. Gabriel, now 16, leafed through the magazine with genuine interest. "Cool, Mom, it has your photos and everything. Can I take it to show my friends?" Julia, in turn, read the entire article, absorbing every word. "You're an inspiration," she said, hugging Victoria with an unusual intensity for a 13-year-old. "When I grow up, I want to be like you." "Like me?" Victoria laughed, surprised. "I thought you wanted to be a doctor." "It's not the profession," explained Julia with a wisdom beyond her years. "It's the courage to start over, to follow your dreams even when it seems impossible." Her daughter's words stayed with Victoria for the rest of the day, echoing in her mind like a precious validation. Amid the uncertainties and difficulties of her personal transformation, knowing that she was inspiring Julia to be courageous in her own choices was an invaluable gift. Roger, on the other hand, barely looked at the magazine. Since the night Victoria had seen Lucy's message, an even greater distance had settled between them. They coexisted in the same space like cordial strangers, exchanging only essential information about the house and children. The definitive conversation they needed to have was constantly postponed, out of convenience, fear, inertia. On her 43rd birthday, 2 weeks after the publication of the article, Victoria received an unexpected invitation. Anthony asked her for coffee after work, and with his characteristic direct manner, made a proposal that would change the course of her life. "I'm planning a work trip to Kyoto next month. 2 weeks to study traditional Japanese architecture, specifically the concept of wabi-sabi, and how we can incorporate it into contemporary projects. I'd like you to accompany me as an interior design consultant." Victoria felt her heart accelerate. Kyoto, the ancient imperial capital of Japan, with its centuries-old temples, Zen gardens, and living design tradition. It was an extraordinary opportunity, professionally and personally. And also an item from her old wish list, to live temporarily in another country. "It would be incredible," she replied, feeling the excitement grow. "But I need to check how to organize things at home. 2 weeks is quite a long time." "Naturally," agreed Anthony. "Think carefully, but know that your contribution would be valuable. Your eye for cultural fusion is exactly what we need to develop the next phase of the firm." That night, Victoria arrived home determined to have the conversation she had been postponing with Roger. Not just about the trip, but about everything: the marriage, the future, the separate paths they had been silently treading. She found him in the office working on his laptop as usual. She knocked lightly on the half-open door. "Can we talk?" Roger looked up, visibly tense. "Now?" "Now." They sat in the small living room, the one they rarely used, as if the subject was too formal for the familiar spaces of the house. Victoria was direct. "I received an invitation for a work trip to Kyoto. 2 weeks next month." Roger stared at her, a mixture of surprise and irritation on his face. "And you're going, obviously." "I want to go, yes. It's an important opportunity for my career." "Your career," he repeated, with a touch of bitterness. "How convenient to rediscover it after 15 years being supported by me." The injustice of the comment hit Victoria like a slap, but she maintained her composure. "I wasn't supported, Roger. I worked every day of those 15 years without salary, without recognition, without vacations, taking care of our house, our children, you. And now you've decided that's no longer enough." "Now I've decided. I need more than that to feel alive." Victoria took a deep breath before continuing. "But it's not just about the work, it's about us, about what we've become or ceased to be over the years." A heavy silence settled between them. Roger looked away, suddenly interested in the pattern of the carpet. "You're with her, aren't you?" Victoria finally asked, her voice calm, almost gentle. "With Lucy?" Roger closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering courage. "Yes." The confirmation, though expected, provoked a strange sense of closure, like the last chapter of a book that drags on for too long. How long? 8 months. He finally looked at her. It wasn't planned, Victoria. It happened. Things are rarely planned, she agreed, surprising him with her serenity. Like me going back to work, like this marriage ending. So that's it? We're ending? The question hung in the air, loaded with decades of shared history, the good moments, the children, the houses, the trips, but also the silences, the distances, the small and large daily betrayals. I think we ended a long time ago, Roger. We're just recognizing it now. In the days that followed, a strange calm settled in the apartment. They decided not to tell the children immediately. First, they would organize the practical details, find an apartment for Roger, establish a visitation routine. It was important that Gabriel and Julia knew that, despite the end of the marriage, the family would continue to exist in new ways. Meanwhile, Victoria confirmed her participation in the trip to Kyoto and immersed herself in the preparations, both professional and personal. She studied Japanese history and architecture in her spare hours, practiced basic phrases on the language app, organized documents. The prospect of the trip brought an excitement she hadn't felt since college days. 1 week before departure, Renee insisted on taking her out to celebrate. "It's not every day that my best friend is going to fulfill a 2-decade dream," she argued, as she dragged Victoria to dinner at a sophisticated Japanese restaurant in Soho. It was a night of laughter, confidences, and champagne, a celebration, not only of the imminent trip, but of the entire journey of rediscovery that Victoria had been traversing in recent months. "Remember when you told me you were lost?" asked Renee, when they were already at dessert. "Look at you now, a respected professional, about to travel to the other side of the world, rebuilding your life on your own terms." "I'm still scared," admitted Victoria. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night in panic, thinking about everything that's changing at the same time." "Fear is the price of freedom," philosophized Renee, raising her glass in a toast. "To your courage, Victoria Mitchell. May it continue to inspire other women to find their own path." On the eve of the trip, after carefully packing her suitcase, practical but elegant clothes, the red diary from her college days, the camera, and of course the red lipstick that had started it all, Victoria sat on the balcony of the apartment. New York stretched out before her, glittering under the night sky, the city that had always been her home and that now seemed different, seen through new eyes. She thought of her children, who had received the news of the separation with a mixture of sadness and surprising understanding. "We want you both to be happy, even if it's not together," Gabriel had said, mature beyond his years. Julia, in turn, had grown even closer to her mother, sharing her own dreams and fears with a new openness. She thought of Roger, who had already begun looking for an apartment nearby and who, despite the initial hurt, seemed relieved that they no longer had to pretend. "I never wanted to hurt you," he had said in one of their recent conversations. "Maybe it was better this way. You found your way back to yourself." She thought about her work, about the profound satisfaction she felt in seeing a project come to life, in knowing she was creating something with meaning and beauty. And she thought about herself, the woman she had been, the one she had become, the one she was allowing herself to be again. It wasn't a linear journey, nor easy, nor concluded. There were days of doubt, moments of guilt, instants of pure terror in the face of the unknown. But there was also a growing sense of authenticity, as if she were finally living in accordance with her inner truth. At the airport the following morning, Victoria met Anthony in the international departure area. He welcomed her with a warm smile and a comment about her radiant appearance. "It's the lipstick," she joked, indicating the vibrant red on her lips. "My lucky charm." While waiting for the boarding call, Anthony casually asked if she had thought about what she would do after completing the Institute's project. "I have some ideas," replied Victoria, feeling a new confidence in her voice. "Actually, I'm considering opening my own studio, small, focused on projects that tell stories, that create connections between people and spaces." "It would be a loss for our firm," he commented. "But we would gain an exceptional business partner, Count on me for whatever you need in this endeavor." The boarding announcement interrupted the conversation. As they walked toward the gate, Victoria felt an almost physical lightness, as if leaving behind not just a country, but an entire way of existing. Ahead of her, beyond the ocean, awaited a world of possibilities that she was just beginning to explore. Adjusting her bag on her shoulder, she headed toward the aircraft, ready for the next chapter of her journey. In her bag, along with her passport and travel documents, she carried a small new notebook with a navy blue cover. On the first page, she had written a simple but powerful title, "Before 50, followed by a list of dreams that this time she was determined to fulfill. Autumn in Kyoto painted the trees in shades of red and gold, creating a breathtaking landscape that Victoria tirelessly captured with her camera. The 2 planned weeks transformed into 3, then into an entire month, with the blessing of her children who encouraged her through almost daily video calls and the enthusiastic approval of the Cultural Institute, which saw in the extension of the trip a benefit for the project. Each morning brought a new discovery, a temple hidden among mountains, a Zen garden meticulously cared for by monks, an atelier of artisans keeping centuries-old techniques alive. Alongside Anthony, Victoria absorbed not only technical knowledge about Japanese architecture, but a philosophy of life that she began to incorporate into her own being. Wabi-sabi, explained a master ceramist during a visit to his studio on the outskirts of the city. It's finding beauty in imperfection, valuing the incomplete, accepting the impermanence of all things. Those words resonated deeply with Victoria. Wasn't that exactly what she was learning in her own life? To accept her imperfections, to value her incomplete journey, to find beauty in the marks that time and experiences had left on her. In her moments of solitude, which she now sought and appreciated instead of fearing, she wrote extensively in her navy blue diary. Not just professional observations about the spaces she visited, but personal reflections, re-signified memories, plans for the future. It was as if, thousands of miles from home, she could see clearly the path she had traveled and what was yet to come. One afternoon, sitting in a traditional cafe with a view of an ancient temple, Victoria received an email that made her hold her breath for a moment. It was from Melissa Sanders, editor-in-chief of the magazine that had published the article about the Cultural Institute. "Your story inspired several readers," the message said. "We would like to invite you to write a monthly column about interior design with a special focus on transformations of spaces and lives." Victoria reread the email several times, hardly believing what she was seeing. Her writing for a national magazine, sharing not only technical knowledge but her own journey of rebirth. The idea was as unexpected as it was exciting. "You should accept," said Anthony when she told him about the invitation, as they dined at a small restaurant specializing in tofu. "You have a unique way of connecting spaces and emotions. This shows through when you talk about your work." "I don't know if I have that much to say," hesitated Victoria, still assimilating the proposal. "You have more than you imagine," he replied, with that perceptive look that seemed to see beyond the surface. "Your personal story, intertwined with your professional eye, it's a powerful combination. It could help many women who are where you were a year ago." That observation touched something deep in Victoria. Throughout her journey of rediscovery, she had focused primarily on herself, her needs, her repressed desires, her dormant potential. But what if this experience could serve a greater purpose? What if, by sharing her story, she could illuminate the path for other women who, like her, had lost themselves in others' expectations? The next morning, she responded to the email accepting the invitation, proposing a series titled "Redesigning Spaces, Rediscovering Lives." The editor's enthusiastic response came within hours, confirming that the first column should be delivered as soon as she returned to the United States. The final days in Kyoto gained a new meaning with that perspective. As she visited the last temples on her list, Victoria was already imagining how she would translate those experiences into words, how she would connect the principles of Japanese design with lessons for the everyday life of her future readers. On the eve of her return to the United States, while carefully packing the souvenirs she would take, A wabi-sabi ceramic tea set, architecture books, small samples of traditional fabrics. Victoria received a call from Julia. "Mom, I have a surprise for you when you get back," announced her daughter, her voice overflowing with excitement even through the international connection. "Gabriel and I are preparing something special." "What's this mystery?" laughed Victoria, delighted with her daughter's enthusiasm. "I'll give just one clue. It has to do with your return to work. It's a welcome back gift, but also of new beginnings." That conversation left Victoria intrigued and emotional. The children, whom she had initially feared would resent her new professional life and the recent separation, had become her biggest supporters. Gabriel, with his practical nature, helped with logistical and technological issues. Julia, creative and sensitive, had become a kind of confident and even aesthetic advisor at times. The return flight was long but tranquil. Seated next to Anthony, who occasionally made observations about the projects they would develop from that trip, Victoria alternated between reviewing her professional notes and writing in her personal diary. At one point, she realized that the boundaries between these two spheres of her life, so rigidly separated in the past, now naturally mixed. Her professional eye was informed by her personal experiences, and her personal life was enriched by her aesthetic sensitivity. "You know what impressed me most about Japan?" she commented to Anthony as they flew over the Pacific Ocean. "How they value the process as much as the result. The tea ceremony isn't about the drink itself, but about each gesture, each moment of preparation." "Exactly how life should be," he agreed. "Not just about milestones and achievements, but about being fully present at each stage of the way." That observation stayed with Victoria for the rest of the flight. How many moments had she lost in the past, always yearning for the next milestone, the next task to be completed? How many family dinners had she mechanically prepared, thinking only of finishing quickly to move on to the next obligation? How many outings with the children had she done on autopilot, without really being present? Now she was determined to live differently, to savor each instant, the challenges of the new job, the small daily victories, the conversations with the children, the moments of solitude. Everything was part of a continuous journey, not just steps to reach some predetermined destination. New York's International Airport was relatively quiet that Sunday morning when they disembarked. After saying goodbye, Anthony would continue to Boston to visit relatives before returning to the office. Victoria headed to the arrivals area, eager to reunite with her children. What she saw upon passing through the arrival gate left her momentarily breathless. Gabriel and Julia were there as expected, but not alone. Next to them, holding a colorful sign with the words, "Welcome to your new home," was Renee. And even more surprisingly, a small group of women that Victoria recognized as readers who had contacted her after the publication of the article about the Cultural Institute. "But what is this?" she asked, moved as she was enveloped in warm hugs. "Your reception committee," explained Renee with a radiant smile, "and also your first group of official readers. They're eager for your column in the magazine." "You inspired me to go back to studying at 50, said one of the women, enthusiastically shaking her hand. "Your story showed me that it's never too late. I started redesigning my own apartment after reading about your work," said another. "I was going through a difficult time in my divorce, and transforming my space has been therapeutic." Victoria listened to those accounts with a mixture of astonishment and gratitude. How was it possible that her personal journey, which had begun so solitarily with that red lipstick, now resonated with so many other women? The surprise, however, didn't end there. When they reached the car, Gabriel took the wheel. He had gotten his driver's license during his mother's absence and announced that they would not go directly to the Upper East Side apartment. "Where are we going?" asked Victoria, curious. "To your new home," replied Julia, her eyes shining with excitement. "Or rather, your new home and workplace." Half an hour later, they parked in front of a charming townhouse in Chelsea, a central, vibrant neighborhood, completely different from the more suburban atmosphere of the Upper East Side. The construction, with its preserved Art Deco-style facade, seemed to come from a dream Victoria didn't even know she had. "I don't understand. she murmured as Gabriel took her suitcase from the trunk. "It's a gift from the three of us," explained Renee, handing her an envelope containing keys. "I found the property. It had been for sale for months, needing someone with vision to restore. Gabriel and Julia approved the idea. And Roger, well, he contributed financially as part of the separation agreement. We sold the apartment on the Upper East Side," added Gabriel. "Dad bought a smaller one in the same building for us to stay with him on alternate weekends, and we invested your share in this place, which can be your home and your design studio." Stunned, Victoria followed the small group to the entrance of the townhouse. Upon opening the door, she was greeted by a luminous space that, although needing renovation, overflowed with potential. The first floor had high ceilings, large windows, and preserved architectural details that told the story of the building. The second floor, connected by an elegant wooden staircase, offered comfortable rooms for her and for the children on nights when they would stay together. "The best part is here," said Julia, leading her to the back of the house where a more recent extension housed a space that had clearly been conceived as an atelier or studio. "Your new workspace, with perfect natural light and a view of the small garden." Victoria turned slowly, absorbing every detail of the environment, her mind already bubbling with ideas for the renovation. It was as if the place had been waiting for her, a space that, like herself, carried history and character, but was ready for a new chapter. "I don't even know what to say," she murmured, feeling tears of gratitude forming in her eyes. "It's more than I could dream of." "You deserve it, Mom," said Gabriel with a moving seriousness. "Seeing you rediscovering your passion taught us something important, that we should always honor who we truly are. Even if it's scary sometimes," completed Julia, "even if it means changing everything." In the weeks that followed, Victoria divided her time between finalizing the Cultural Institute project, planning the renovation of her new home studio, and writing her first column for the magazine. Adapting to the new routine, living closer to the center, working from home, sharing custody of the children with Roger, brought daily challenges, but also a growing sense of authenticity that compensated for any difficulty. The first column, published 2 months after her return, became an immediate success. Titled "The Space Between," it blended observations about Japanese architecture with reflections on life transitions and the courage necessary to inhabit the unknown. Letters and emails from readers began to arrive, women of all ages and contexts who identified with her journey and found inspiration for their own transformations. One afternoon, while supervising the installation of shelves in her new studio, now almost completely renovated, with a balanced mix of contemporary and historical elements, Victoria received an unexpected visit. Renee arrived accompanied by an elegant woman who introduced herself as Carolina Martinez, director of a streaming channel dedicated to female content. "Your column has been making a significant impact," explained Carolina after the initial greetings. "We want to propose something more ambitious, a documentary series about women who reinvented their lives after 40, and we would like you to be not only the first story, but also a creative consultant for the spaces we'll present." The proposal was bold, scary, and tremendously exciting. It would mean exposing her personal story in an even more public way, using her own vulnerability as a bridge to other women. But wasn't that exactly what she was already doing on a smaller scale? "I need to think," Victoria replied honestly. "Consult my children, organize my other commitments." "Naturally," agreed Carolina. "But may I leave a thought with you? Sometimes, our greatest contribution to the world isn't our talent or technical knowledge, but our authentic story, with all its imperfections and new beginnings." That night, after a quiet dinner with Gabriel and Julia, who showed enthusiasm for the idea of the documentary, Victoria sat on the small veranda of her new home. The New York sky displayed a spectacle of stars rarely visible in the illuminated city, as if silently celebrating her journey. She took from her purse her navy blue diary and the red lipstick that had started it all. She applied the color to her lips in a gesture that was now almost ritual, and opened the diary to the last page, where her before 50 list continued to grow. She added a new item, share my story in a way that inspires other women to find their own voice. As she wrote, she reflected on the path traveled since that wedding anniversary night, when she saw herself invisible in the bathroom mirror. How many transformations, how many discoveries, how many moments of fear and courage. The woman who had been lost for so long had not only found herself, but discovered that her personal journey had the power to illuminate the path for others. The next morning, upon entering her newly inaugurated studio to work on a new project, the renovation of an old bookstore in downtown New York that would be transformed into a cultural space, Victoria paused for a moment to admire what she had created. The walls displayed a mural of photographs of her works, clippings of her column, in the magazine, sketches of future projects. In a special frame, the list she had written at age 22 stood out, now framed as a constant reminder of her original dreams. Next to the desk, a small personal altar gathered significant objects from her journey. The red lipstick in its already worn golden case, the red notebook from her college days, a stone from the Zen garden in Kyoto, a recent photograph with Gabriel and Julia in the new home. Sitting down to start the workday, Victoria opened her laptop and typed a title in the blank document, Episode 1, The Space Between, How Getting Lost Can Be the Beginning of Truly Finding Yourself. The words began to flow naturally, telling a story that was simultaneously unique and universal. The story of a woman who, after years living as a secondary character in her own life, found the courage to claim the leading role. Not a perfect role or one without conflicts, but authentic, with all the complexities, fears, and joys that make up a truly lived life. And as she wrote, Victoria knew with growing certainty that this wasn't just her story. It was a testimony for all women who had ever felt invisible, who had forgotten their own dreams, who had lost their voice. A reminder that it's never too late to redesign the spaces, physical and emotional, that we inhabit. Never too late to rediscover the person who was always there, patiently waiting to be seen. Dear listeners, we hope that Victoria's story has touched your hearts and perhaps awakened reflections on your own journeys of self-discovery. To continue this emotional voyage, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about personal new beginnings and transformations. Find it here by clicking to the left of the video. If this narrative resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Daily, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of reinvention that exists in each of us. Share in the